Howdy and welcome to another postcard from Moorhead. I'm Larry Dixon, and with me today
is Jerry Hart.
Jerry Hart. Jerry, what are we doing today?
Today we are going to make less traditional hand pies. Traditionally, hand pies are like a biscuit dough that would have a fruit filling in it, and then you deep fry them. And that's the way we did it as a kid. Today we're going to use a pie dough instead of the biscuit dough and bake them in the oven. So pie dough is not a lot better for you, but it's a little better than deep frying, but not much. So we're going to we've made a meat filling using Pennington's chuck roast and made it into basically a pot roast. And then I shredded it all. So it's got, we browned the beef really well and add onions and caramelize them, add a little flour, make a roux, and then it gets carrots, celery, parsnips. I like the little bit of sweet parsnip. And then chicken stock, because I didn't have any beef stock, and tomato. Cook that all up with some thyme and then just let it bake for about 3 hours and let it fall apart, and we use that as a filling. So, pie dough.
Okay.
All right, we've measured out 2 cups of flour. And this would be enough for, like if you were doing an apple pie with a bottom crust and a top crust, I'd start with 2 cups of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of table salt, and you could use kosher salt, but you want to try to grind it up a little bit. You want that salt to grind fine enough to spread evenly throughout the dough, as opposed to like if you make a cookie with coarse salt, you bite into the cookie and once in a while you'll get a little taste of the salt more than anything. So it helps to have a finer grind. Now, I want some butter flavor in my pie crust. So I take a tablespoon of butter for every cup. So I got 2 tablespoons of butter here. I roll it in the flour so it's coated, and then I just grate the butter so I don't have a chunk of really hard cold butter trying to break it up. But as I grate it in there, I'll grate 4, 5, 6 times, and then I'll toss some flour on the pieces so you get pieces of butter that are coated in the flour. So that as that melts when it's baking, that gives you the flake. You got layers of dough, fat in between. When it bakes, the butter melts, the shortening melts, and you get an airspace, the flake in between. That's what makes a flaky dough. So,
okay.
Now we got 1 cup of Crisco we're going to use. Now, it's a ratio thing. We do 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of shortening, 1/2 cup of water. All right, so I put 2 tablespoons of butter in there. So I'm going to cut off 2 tablespoons of butter here and shorten it to make the ratio stay the same. There's my cup of shortening. And I take a pastry cutter. So wire, some of them are wire, some of them have blades, either one work fine. I throw some flour on top. I cut down through it and then I shake it off. You want this to get coated so it's separate pieces. And I cut down, I keep right on going. And cutting it against the bowl. This is great because it forms right against the side of the bowl. If it gets stuck on there, you just rake it all off. Keep going around and you keep cutting that till it gets the size of a dried bean. So you're not going to cut it to where it's mixed in 100%. You want chunks of shortening. So you want chunks of shortening like that are coated in flour. Now what that gives you then is when you mix in the flour, this mixes in a little bit, but then when you roll it out, it flattens it out in between the layers of dough. So when we're done with this, and now we need a 1/2 cup of water, and we want ice water. The ice cools the water down, it chills the shortening down. whether you're using lard or Crisco, cold water makes it more firm, so it's easier to mix without completely incorporating it. You want the layers. So, half a cup of water. And what I like to do right off the bat is just shake it around. I'm trying to incorporate it and mix it and smear it as little as possible. So now that I've got it all coated, I've got a glob of wet in the dough and a bunch of dry. So I'll just pick it up and I'll crumble it. I'm not trying to mix it in. And keep digging down in there and picking up the big pieces and just crumble them up. Try to keep your hand coated with the flour. And then once I get it to about there, I've kind of got a lot of wet spots and dry in between. Then I take the back of my hand, this part of my hand, and I just press it. You don't want to take it and mix it this way. If you mix it like this, you smear the shortening and flour together. If I press it, it creates those layers. Now I'm going to pick it up. I've got a lot of dry on the bottom. I'll pick it up, I'll turn it over. I'll pick the other side up, put it on top, and I'll just press again. Pick the whole thing up, turn it over, trying to get that flour out of the bottom and putting it on top and press it. And I'm pressing hard. I'm not just, pressing it that little bit, but that forces the water out of the wet areas and the dry area, and it becomes one mass. Now it's still a little crumbly, and that's exactly what you want. So now now if I was making a pie, you take 2 balls, top and bottom crust. Now I'm pressing together, I'm not smearing. So I'm like making a snowball, like you press a snowball together to pack it. And you can roll it around in the loose stuff in the bottom, pick that up, and pack it again. Now if I was making a pie, I just throw that in the refrigerator, get my fruit ready or whatever my filling's gonna be, chicken pot pie, anything, and then roll it out. And we'll do that here in a minute. Now, because we're gonna do this into the hand pies, we need smaller pieces. We don't need the big ones. So I take that and cut it into 6 pieces. So each one of those I'll cut in thirds. And I know you get this stuff all over your hands, and that's what every baker does. Go right in there and into the refrigerator. But that's how quick it is to make pie crust. You don't have to buy pie crust just rolled out. Certainly can, but Crisco lasts a long time. Okay, we're going to make an apple filling, and I've diced up a bunch of apples already, and these were big apples, so we're going to have extra here, but we'll save that for making oatmeal in the morning, or we could throw it into apple pancakes or something like that tomorrow, or you could just heat it up and have it with pork chops.
Okay.
But peeling an apple.
Okay, I got a question.
Yep.
Okay, now you pre-cut these
Yep.
ahead of time and made really small, and you're going to show us how to make it
Yep.
really
We're going to have
small.
to show how to cut.
Okay, what did you do to keep them from turning brown?
Yeah. I threw a little bit of lemon juice. You need some acid. So lemon juice is an easy trick. About a teaspoon or so of apple juice, and then I tossed them real well. Peeling the apple, I start at the top. I turn the apple and then pull the peeler towards my thumb. I'm not doing this. Do this, and I taught a class just a couple weeks ago at the Round County High School, and of course the kids instantly start peeling apples like this, and 2 of them cut their fingers with a vegetable peeler. So if you pull it towards your thumb, you have a lot more control, you're just as fast, and you don't nick yourself as much. the other thing that's important, we try to peel it in one piece. Okay, so as opposed to cutting this whole thing up, easiest way to do it for a small dice, you slice down. I'm looking for a 1/4 inch dice, so 3 cuts. If I cut the seed, make sure you pop the seed out and then stack them right back up. Keep them stacked up the same way they came off of the apple. Turn the flat side down. Cut your next section. Turn it over, flat side down. Little piece of peel there. And you could leave the peel on. There's nothing wrong with leaving the peel on if you like that texture. So, core goes to the horses. I stack this back up. Cut it down. Diced apples. So, the trick is, and I'll show you on this little piece, when you're using a knife, you want to learn, you keep your fingertips, these two, tucked in towards your body at an angle. This part of your finger straight up and down. The knife rests against your finger. So it's resting like that, fingertips tucked in. You can't stick your knuckles out. If like this is straight up and down, you're fine. If you lean that way, then your knuckles stick out. You will cut your knuckles off. I've got lots of scars to prove it. If you bring the knife above these knuckles, you cut here. I got those scars too. So, if I'm holding something here and I'm cutting out here, I don't know where that knife is and I can't control the thickness of what I'm cutting. To where if I'm here, I don't even have to look at what I'm cutting. I know where the knife is. So, if I'm sitting here prepping at a restaurant and cutting things and somebody yells or burns something, or I can look around, I can keep cutting, I can look to make sure the cook that I hired isn't messing up the recipe or something, and I get real even cuts. And it doesn't matter whether it's a 1/8 inch, a brunoise, a large dice, small dice, whatever size, but how you use the knife is the same.
Well, you threw a word out that I'm not used to. I've heard brunoise.
Brunoise is like an 1/8 inch dice. It's a French term just relating to the size of your cut. So, small dice, little tiny. Brunoise would be, I don't have a big apple to do it.
That's tiny.
A brunoise. And we're going to turn this on and crank it up. We'll add a little bit of water, a couple tablespoons of water, because I want a little bit of a glaze with this that we're mixing up. Now, I've got a little extra sugar in here. I'm gonna need some for the top after we make them. So I'll save that to go on top. And then I'll take the sugar and a little bit of flour. I like the flour instead of all cornstarch because it gives me a different texture on the glaze. All right, so now I'll take the flour and the sugar and the cornstarch and I'll mix them together. And that will kind of dissipate, spread that flour out, and cornstarch especially out, to where when I dump it into the apples, I don't get chunks of lumps of flour and cornstarch that I then have to fight like crazy to get mixed in. And we got a big container here, so we're going to make our life easy. We've got a lot more apple here than we need. So I'm going to steal some out just because I'm going to end up throwing it on the floor in this pan. And we'll use that for something else later. So, cornstarch, flour, and sugar. 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, pinch of nutmeg. You don't need a lot of nutmeg. Mix this all in. We'll bring it to a boil. The faster it's going to work. So we're going to mix that all up. Try not to throw too much on the floor so we don't have much cleanup. And this was chilled down. We had pot roast the other night. And I saved this and kind of shredded the beef a little bit. So this has got a fair amount of meat, like a pasty would be mostly potatoes and onions and a lot less meat than this. It's a real traditional ones. But I wanted to get you a look at that. You can see the carrots, diced parsnips, and everything in there. We'll use that here in a minute. And then this is starting to cook and thicken up that liquid. The sugar melts down, pulls moisture out of the apples, and the starch cooks it up. And what it looks like in about 5 minutes is that. So the apples with the glaze, and it helps to chill it down. It makes it easier for you when you put it into the pie dough, because that hot apple is going to melt the shortening, and you really don't want that until it gets into the oven. So all you're going to do is bring this to a full boil. You don't have to cook the apples very much at all because they're cut so small they're going to bake. You could add dried cranberries to this if you want a different flavor. Toasted walnuts. If you want, you can vary this in any number of ways. We used to do one that was apples, dried apricots, and walnuts. So this is
starting to come to a boil.
It's thickening just that little bit, and that's really all you need. So once I get all that liquid thickened, this is done. And then we would just put it in a pan, throw it in the refrigerator, and chill it down. That's what we have here.
Okay. This
is a trick that I think anybody that's going to bake and roll out stuff, this is the best trick that I have been using, and I've been using this piece of cloth for 40 years.
Okay, now, I am not familiar with this at all.
Yeah.
So this is called a what now?
A pastry cloth.
Pastry cloth, okay.
And they also call it a couche, I think. And you pay about $40 for a couche. It's a piece of cloth. You don't need to spend $40. It's a piece of muslin, thick, unbleached. Even if it was bleached, the dye's you're not gonna get that much of it off. Ideally, you want something unbleached. You want something about as thick as blue jean. So it's a heavy cloth. The way you clean it, you just scrape it. You can scrape it with a bench scraper. You can scrape it with a knife if you go careful. You don't want to cut your cloth. If you don't have a bench scraper, a knife will work. Just lay it down and go slow. And you're not getting any water on this. It's just flour on it. A little bit of the fat comes out of the dough, sticks on there. So it's not like you wash this every time. I'll show you when we're done with this, what we're going to do. So we're going to take the flour. Barely get my hand in there. A little bit of flour on the dough, just so it's there for later. Let me get the pie dough out. So the pie dough's chilled down a little bit, so it's a little more firm. Form it into like a hockey puck shape. Flour on both sides. Push it together. If you see any cracks, push it together a little bit. Now, I don't care whether you're rolling out a rectangle, a round, a big one, a little one. It's the same kind of technique. I roll the center, and I leave it thick here and here. And I turn it 90 degrees, and I roll it again. So now I've got thick on the corners. If it was a bigger ball of dough, it'd be more, little, you'd be able to see them easier. But if you're doing round, you get it together like that. This is starting to get sticky, so I flip it over. Now I roll on the high points. So I turn it to, 2 o'clock and 7 o'clock kind of thing.
So what thickness are you aiming for?
I'm looking for about an 1/8 inch.
That's pretty thin.
And you can see the layers of colors. You see the white, little bits of yellow, layers of white. That's the shortening of the white. When that melts away, that gives you your flake. So you want to roll round, so you roll out from the center in all the directions and keep it round. Now, I'm looking for about a 6.5 inch piece of dough.
I wondered what you were doing with the little pan.
It's just to give me, you could use a plate. If you're going to cut this with a knife, don't cut your cloth. All right, we've rolled out our first piece of dough.
You put this paper on there. What kind of paper is
this?
that?
Is parchment paper, so it can go in the oven and won't burn up. Roll your corners out. If one side is smaller, it's more narrow here, I'll roll this here and I'll leave it thick on that side. Because then if I roll this direction, because that was thicker, this side's not going to move, but it's going to widen that side out. So it's going to keep my rectangle. And then you're going to line a pan with this. And this is the great thing about the cloth. You pick the cloth up to get it started on the rolling pin. And you roll it, pick it up. Now this is a pretty small piece if I had a big pot pie. And then you unroll it over top to let it drop down in to something.
That's right handy.
Yeah. Now the other trick, like if you're going to line a pan like this to fill, I would take a little bit of butter and rub just on the outside, on the walls. So when this got picked up and dropped in, I could use that butter to help stick it to the side, to hold the side up.
When you went to this cooking school,
yeah,
I can see you did pay attention.
Here's the trick. This is the trick I wanted to show you. So we're done. Usually I wouldn't have this mess on here. If you want to take it off. Bench scraper or a little knife. Now, you've got your counter. This, fold that there, fold it. Wipe this off, put it away. You just cleaned up your mess. If you put it in a Ziploc bag, don't seal it. What little bit of moisture in the air and everything, you want to let it dry. If this gets wet, you wrap it up like this, put it in a plastic bag, put it on the shelf. It'll start to mold a little bit.
That's not a good thing.
That's not a good thing. You put it in, ideally, throw it in a paper bag, like a lunch bag, brown paper bag. If it gets wet, like you get egg wash on it or you get buttermilk on it, we're going to use today, then you can wash it. And I do a lot of baking at home, so I've always got buttermilk. You could use water to seal this. You could use egg wash. You could use milk. I've gotten in the habit of using buttermilk. And you're going to put a really thin layer on here. Just enough to make it sticky. And you go all the way around. That's where you're going to be sealing it, is on that about a 1-inch part of the edge. So we are going to take this and we're going to use about a 1/4 cup.
Now this has been chilled.
This is.
You don't want to put the hot apples.
Yeah, the hot makes it, it's just, the glaze is a little more runny and it starts softening your dough a lot. So you chill it down. Now we'll take the meat filling the same way. And we'll put
that looks
about a 1/4 cup.
That looks awfully tasty.
It's not bad.
Or should I say very tasty.
Not bad. So this
and
is.
it smells good.
This is, yeah. All right, so that we got the air out of it. Now, you can take a fork, go around. You can roll it and do a little seam on it. I like to take 2 fingers here and my finger there and go around. Just moving my finger, index finger goes where the thumb sat, and you work around it, and you get a ruffle. And then we will brush the top with the buttermilk.
I would have never thought about using buttermilk.
I just had it in the refrigerator one day, and it was like, well, I didn't want to crack an egg for a little bit, and it really worked. That's what a lot of times people are talking about. Oh, this dish was balanced really well. It tasted very balanced. Mm-hmm. Generally, they're talking about sweet, salt, sour. If you figure, if you get the right amount of sweetness in a dish, and then desserts are much more sweet than a pot roast. But pot roast, the sweetness comes from the onions. A lot of sugar in onions. So you balance the sweet, the salt, and the sour. In pot roast, the sour would be from the tomatoes. Or if you put in a little white wine or red wine, either one. But you're balancing all of those flavors out. So for this, we've got the apple. We're going to generously sprinkle the top with sugar. Don't mix up the sugar on the pot pie, on the beef.
Oh,
now,
okay.
You could put, because this is a savory thing, you can add just a little bit of kosher salt to the surface. Gives you a nice bite of salt like that. You could put on a little bit of paprika if you wanted. Especially if you're doing 2 or 3 of these together, you want to decorate them differently so you can tell them apart. Put a little, the salt and paprika on your meat, sugar on your apple. Do you have a scissors? Easy way. You gotta, if you bake these just like this, the moisture in the apples or the sauce, the gravy, creates steam. That steam's going to go somewhere. Easiest place for it to go is to bust out the side. It's going to squirt out and push your apples out, push your filling all around. So you need to open up a hole to let the steam out. That's what you do. And those are ready to go in the oven. 350. They bake about 40 minutes. You want them, you don't want to underbake them. If you underbake them, the dough is going to be doughy, and you want to give it time to really bake all the way through. And when we put it in the oven, we'll put it on the middle, or even just no higher than the middle, or down just a little bit. You want, as these bake, you want bottom heat, so you get closer to that element. If you put it in the top of the oven, that heat's going to rise and roll real tight around the top, and it's going to brown very quickly on the top. It's going to look gorgeous, but the bottom's going to be doughy. Same on a pie. So when you bake a pie, lower it in the rack. Put a lower rack in the oven. Not all the way to the bottom, but the middle. Then now I've got the heat coming up, and you get a blast of heat here, and it wraps around. That blast of heat bakes the bottom crust. and works. All right, now we go in the oven. Middle shelf, 350, and we wait.
For how long?
About 40 minutes.
40 minutes. I'll set a timer.
All right, sounds good. All right. Yeah.
Okay, this has been in the oven how long?
This
Total
is,
time?
Total time was about 50 minutes. We thought we were going to bake at 40. This oven's running a little bit slow to meet, a little lower temperature. So we extended the time, and what you're looking for is you want to make sure the bottom is brown.
Ooh.
So that's why we put it on the lower shelf, middle shelf, as opposed to on the top shelf. Top shelf, it would have been brown on top, but it wouldn't have been that brown on the bottom. So,
And it's obvious which one is the apple.
well, you can see the
it's
sugar,
color.
the color, the buttermilk, the sugar in the milk caramelizes too, but the sugar itself does, and you can still see the crystal of salt on these, on the meat pie. And it's the same, the baking time is the same on both. So, you need a fork.
We need taste testers.
All right,
Drew's over there going, num, 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 num.
yeah, but I'll tell you right now, these are hot right out of the oven. So,
And Drew came with a fork.
good man.
Get in there, Drew.
Just want to let people see
Yes.
how flaky. You can see all the crumbs flying.
Oh, it's hot, Drew.
It's hot.
Now this is the apple.
Yeah. You jump in there. And it's hot. And that's the meat pie. Yeah. But you can see how flaky it is.
What was that recommendation, Drew?
Eat more.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to try this meat pie,
All right, whichever you need first.
and it is hot. It is
It's
steamy.
steaming. It's hot. It's right out of.
Very good.
She spoke.
She spoke. But you can see the crust, real flaky. See here. And all that is the layers of shortening and the layers of dough. And that's why when you roll out that dough, you want to see the streaks of white. I'm going here. Now, you know, the traditional hand pie would have been deep fried, would have cooked a lot faster. This is just a little different with baking it. So,
I think I like this better than the deep fried. The deep fried's a little greasy. Okay. Now,
it's hot.
it's hot. Questions. Okay, let's say I make a dozen of each. Can I warm them up?
Yeah, that one, especially the apple, are great at room temperature. You don't refrigerate them, wrap them up, leave them on the counter. They're great for a day, easily. If you want them warm, throw them back in the oven. If you put them in the microwave, you get too much steam and it makes the crust soggy.
I don't like
Now,
soggy.
the meat pie, if you do and you could do a chicken filling the same way. If you do any kind of meat filling like that, you'd want to refrigerate that so it doesn't spoil. You can't leave that on the counter for hours and hours. But back in a 350 oven for 15, 20 minutes, just enough to warm it through.
Yeah.
Here,
We got more.
we got more.
Yeah, so you could make this ahead. If you're going to try to do it for a couple days ahead, yeah, you could make them and freeze them. Make these ahead 6, 8, 10 hours ahead. For the apple would be great. Leave on the counter and just eat them at room temperature. They're wonderful. It's going to be just as flaky and nice. The meat pie, if you bake it ahead, you know, bake it in the morning, you're going to eat it for dinner or something like that, or take it somewhere, you'd refrigerate it in between time and then heat it up when you got there.
Okay, so go ahead and hit that subscribe, hit that like button, and share this.
Yeah.
I'm with Chef Jerry
Hart. Yeah.
And the ingredients for all of this is below. The meat pie is a little time consuming to make
Yeah, to braise the pot roast side, you know, it bakes for 3 hours in the oven at 300 degrees.
100% success from our audience over there. Thumbs up all around. Well, this has been Postcard from Moorhead. I'm Larry Dixon, and with me again is Jerry Hart. Jerry, appreciate you coming by and giving me a lesson, teaching me some techniques. Jerry,
That's what it's all about.
will you come back and do another?
Sure, we'll do it again.
All right,
All right.
excellent.
As long as we can eat like this, we can do it again.
Yes. Don't forget to hit that subscribe, like, and share button.
All right.
Postcard from Moorhead.
Enjoy.